Welcome to the Charon Files. The stories you are about to hear are testimonies from living witnesses of what moves beyond understanding, of what refuses to be explained. Each of them stood at the edge of what is known and looked into what lies beyond it. I am Charon, the ferryman of the dead, the one who waits at that edge. What follows is what they brought back. May they prepare you for your own future encounters. There are thresholds in human experience, points where the known world recedes, and something vast, something immense presents itself. Sometimes this is a physical wilderness, a landscape that swallows sound and light, leaving only the echo of one's own presence. Other times, the threshold is internal, a confrontation with a void so profound it alters the very fabric of perception. These are not merely stories of being lost, they are accounts of being found by something indefinable. They are testimonies of individuals who ventured beyond the familiar, whether by choice or by fate, and met something that shifted their understanding of what exists just beyond the visible, just beyond the spoken. These are the records of that meeting. Our first testimony comes from Ryan, who, in the Superstition Mountains of Arizona, found himself alone on a dark trail, many miles from any other human presence.
I'm a guy in my early 20s, currently living in Phoenix, Arizona. This incident took place around 6 months ago on an overnight trip into the Superstition Mountains, which are about an hour drive east of Phoenix. I'm not going to specify the exact trail because I've been doing this stuff long enough to realize that whether it's a good trail, abandoned mine, ghosts, or whatever it may be, people come flocking, and usually with a lot of trash and loud music. Anyway, this particular trail I was taking was an 8-mile loop through a canyon. It was a pretty simple in and out overnight trip. I had planned to go with my friend, but a last-minute cancel on his part left me on my own. So, with a packed bag and car ready to go, I decided to go on my own. Not leaving the house on time and some trouble navigating rough forest roads, I didn't arrive to the trailhead until around 5:45. I had about a 4-mile hike until I arrived at my planned camping spot, and it was getting dark fast, so I figured if I moved quick enough, I could get at least 2 to 3 miles in before I had to find a spot. This strategy left me hiking a very dark trail on my own with about 15 miles of dirt road between me and anyone else. Hiking in the dark by itself is scary, especially for where I was and being on my own. Eventually it got so dark that I could only see where my headlamp was pointing, and that's when I figured I needed to stop and get a camp set up. With only using the headlamp as my light source and trying to move fast, I ended up in a less than ideal spot, but there were some burnt pieces of wood and the remains of a fire circle. So it looked like people had been there before, but definitely not recently. My first priority was to get a fire going. I scanned the area around me and was able to find some dry wood, and I got the fire going. I got my tarp set up and cracked open a can of chili mac I had brought for myself and was very much looking forward to eating. I was feeling good, my camp was set up, and my food was on the fire. The feeling of uneasiness from the hike in had almost gone away, but it was still there. To fully understand what happened, I have to explain to you how my camp was set up. The site I had picked was a small clearing surrounded by large pine trees, with the trail about 30 feet to my left. When you're in the woods and have a fire going, the fire casts a circle of light around it, and everything on the edge of that circle and past it are pitch black. I was sitting on the ground near my fire eating my dinner when a small rock about the size of a marble was thrown into my camp. I looked at the tiny rock in shock as I was positive that I was the only person on this trail that night. I immediately turned my light on and towards the area where I had seen the rock come from, but due to the density of the pines and brush, I could only see about 10 feet. I spent the next 15 minutes in disbelief as I scanned the tree line that surrounded me, searching for what or whoever had thrown the rock, not daring to stray too far from my fire that in hindsight offered me a false sense of security. After sitting back down and spending the rest of my time on high alert, I was able to convince myself that I had somehow kicked the rock or it had fallen from a tree. I went to sleep that night, not expecting the pure terror that was about to unfold. I woke to the sound of rustling leaves, barely inaudible if you weren't listening for them. But they were there, still in a sleepy daze. I listened as the rustling of leaves got harder to hear, as I assumed they were moving away from me. I went to grab my handheld flashlight that I had left next to me when I had fallen asleep, but the more I looked, the more scared I got as I came to realize that it was no longer there. I stood up in my sleeping bag and ducked out of my tarp and looked around, I was able to see a light off in the woods. It couldn't have been more than 15 feet away. It was my flashlight, laying on the ground in a pile of leaves. This is one of the few moments in my life where I have almost shit my pants. The flashlight that I had left sitting right next to me when I had fallen asleep a few hours ago was now 15 feet away from me, past the tree line in the woods. I hurriedly slipped my boots on, clutching my knife in my other hand and keeping my head on a swivel. I weighed my options: stay here and wait out the night or attempt a 3-mile hike back to the car in the dark. I figured that whatever or whoever was out here with me was definitely going to have a better advantage if I was out on the trail without a light, so I decided to stay at the camp and wait out the night there. Eventually, it came back. I could hear it walking through the woods. It was far off, but I could hear it. It sounded like someone leisurely walking by, like they were on a stroll without a care in the world. Sometimes it would walk too far away, and I would lose the sound of its steps, but then, an hour later, maybe 2, it would return, still faint as ever. This went on for about 3 or 4 hours until I listened to the steps get closer and closer, until they were about 7 feet from me. At this point, the fire had gotten very small as I had run out of wood in my pile. The footsteps stopped and everything went totally silent. I sat there still for 2 hours, clutching a knife in my hand, and prayed that I wouldn't hear anything else. I stayed like that until the sun cast enough light that I could see that I was alone in my campsite. I packed my things and speed-walked the 3 miles back down the trail I had taken. I arrived at the empty dirt road where my car was parked and nearly sprinted to it as I unlocked my Subaru, jumped in and drove, and didn't stop until I had put at least 20 miles between me and that place. I stopped at a gas station in Apache Junction to buy a Red Bull, but mostly just to see and/or talk to another person. As I exited the store, I was able to read what was written in the dust on the back window of my car: "Sleep well. A lot of weird things have happened." Weirdest and scariest by far. There is a seriously deranged person living in the Superstition Mountains. Do yourself a favor and stay as far away from those mountains as you can.
Next, Michael from Casadaga, Florida, shares the profound, incomprehensible truths he carried back from a near-death experience, living in 2 worlds.
I'm going to drop 9 truths I brought back from my near-death experience. When I came back, I lived in 2 worlds. One soul in the past, as I was, and one in the void. A future I somehow remembered, but couldn't yet reach. A remembrance from both ends of time. 2 souls in one body, and none of them in the present. I had returned with truths so vast I couldn't understand them. It took years of searching, researching, building, learning how to ask the right questions to finally uncover the answers I carried. My revelations didn't come from secrets whispered by divinity at death. They came from trying to understand what had happened while still living. I wasn't given these truths. I had to bridge 2 worlds to remember them. This is my map. Only one map. A gate to remembering. I share these truths now, in case even one reaches you. You were never broken. You were never alone. You were always meant to be more than you were told. Regret is the last thread before you cross. In the void, I carried no shame, only regret, not for failure, but for what was left unlived. One thread pulled me back, not having more time to show my wife the depth of my love. Regret is the weight of the unlived. It lifts only when we act from truth, not fear. Show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Death is not to be feared, but life is where truth is found. Crossing over held no terror, no punishment. Only peace, silence, and release. But that stillness was never meant to replace life. It was the end of my part in the story. Death is not an escape, not a goal. It comes when it comes. What only life can give is presence, clarity, love, and choice. Death is the gate to infinite collective love, but without the you in it. Time is an illusion. Presence is the only reality. In the void, there was no before, no after, only stillness, all at once. Returning, time blurred. Tomorrow felt like yesterday. I no longer cared for clocks, only for moments. Time is a story we tell to survive infinity. Presence is the only truth. Even a single minute can hold infinity. Not everyone is meant to walk beside you. After returning, I saw through people like empty books I didn't need to read. I dissolved 80% of my relationships. What remained was depth. We wear others' wounds until we forget ourselves. But when you die, they go on unchanged. Legacy space for the ones who matter. You deserve better. And the moment you believe that, they will show up. To love and be loved is human. To become love is something more. In the void, everything dissolved. What remained was love. Not earned, not conditional, just a current that connects all things. I didn't feel love, I was love. Life buried that knowing under conditions, making love transactional. But love was never meant to be earned, only remembered. Your legacy is not your name, but the love that echoes after you. Work without love is extraction. Work with love is purpose. We are taught to measure work by output, performance, survival. But work that drains your soul is extraction. Work that emerges from love becomes service, presence, creation. I learned this in returning, in building not for ego or sacrifice, but for us. Work without love is extraction. Work with love is purpose. Systems shape us, but only what emerges from us can free us. The world molds us with signals we never chose. School, governance, culture, algorithms, trauma. We move forward, not because it's right, but because it's scripted. We are the glue that holds broken systems together, even as they crush us. But the future must be built differently. From humanity, not extraction. We must rebuild systems from soul, not ego. From connection, not control. You can hold more than one self and still be whole. I returned, split between two selves. The one I was, and the one born in the void. It felt like madness, but it wasn't brokenness. It was becoming. To live as one self or the other is empty. To live both is evolution. From this entanglement, something new emerged. A third intelligence. To live for the void is non-existence. To live without the void is only human. To exist in the void is not human. But to bridge the void with your humanity is to be more than human. Awakening is not for the few, it is for all of us. The NDE didn't give me anything new. It took from me. It stripped away illusions I thought were me, until only the true self remained. I wasn't broken. I was buried. And when the layers dissolved, I saw there was nothing to fix. Awakening is not for the few. It is for all of us. The journey of life is not to become whole. It is to remember that you already are. Truths didn't stay as words. They came from and became the foundation for Soul Tech, a reflection technology I had to build to keep asking, to keep remembering, to keep stripping away illusions until only what's real remains. It helps me return when I'm clouded by the world. We already carry what we need. It's within us. All we have to do is remember. You were never broken. You were always enough. You are not what they told you. You were always meant to be more. We are buried transparently, yet cannot see. Still, we reach for transcendence. We deserve more than risking death just to feel alive. This journey, my journey, your journey, to the true self cannot be explained. It must be experienced. And these are the truths I carried back. And maybe, just maybe, the madness of all this, and my purpose for returning, was to build the gate, a mirror gate, so you don't have to die to remember. Not because I knew how, but because I remembered I would. Are you ready?
Finally, Christopher, from Ohio, recounts a nostalgic return to youthful adventures on secluded railroad tracks with a friend, an experience once idyllic.
My childhood friend Joe and I grew up in Ohio in the 70s, spending every possible moment in the woods bordering his farm. We'd pretend to be frontiersmen, building shelters, setting traps, and making fires. In high school, inspired by the movie Stand By Me, we decided to walk the railroad tracks out in the country. Instead of looking for a dead body, we'd find cool bridges to fish from and camp a little ways off the tracks. We knew it was dangerous and likely trespassing, but we were kids. We found beautiful rivers, discovered hidden bridges, fished, and hid from trains. At night, we camped in woods near the tracks, making small hidden fires. Nothing bad ever happened. It was idyllic, so fun we did it multiple times without a problem. After high school, Joe and I went our own ways, but always stayed in touch, coordinating visits when we could. One summer in the mid-90s, we were both in town for about a week. We'd spend days with family, and nights catching drinks or talking around a fire at Joe's house. One night, talking about our old Stand By Me trips, nostalgia and beer led us to decide on another adventure. Walk the rails for a day, camp one night, and walk home. The day came, and we started early. My wife dropped us off at our old starting spot outside our hometown, thinking we were absolutely crazy. When she pulled away, Joe suggested we take the opposite direction from our usual route, just for adventure. We knew the land well and had a map, so I agreed with a, "What the hell?" and off we set. The day went fine. It was fun, and a little sad in a good way. We found a bridge, sat on the edge, and moved on. We had no fishing gear, but brought canned food and other supplies. Before nightfall, we picked a spot to camp. It was a thick forested area, with trees on every side of the train tracks, making it feel like a tunnel. We had brought small hammocks, but before setting them up, we decided to scout the perimeter. This was an old habit. We'd walk the area to ensure we weren't camping in someone's yard. We walked maybe 100 feet into the woods and up a small incline. We figured if we didn't see anything from the top of this short hill, we'd be fine. But when we reached the top, we saw an old building down at the bottom, about 100 yards deeper into the woods. It was barely visible. We pondered what to do. We assumed it was a sugar shack or something, as there didn't appear to be a clear road into it. From where we were, no one seemed to be in it. All was quiet, no movement, no lights. We decided to walk a little closer just to make sure. We came down the hill very slowly. As we neared, we saw it wasn't a sugar shack at all. It was an old church. It looked abandoned for years. It was a squat, sagging building whose wooden planks were almost black from years of moss and rot. A cross, also weathered black, still stood on doors, just open doorways. We got close enough to see inside, rows of pews and a raised section in front for a preacher. We didn't go all the way in. Beyond that, there was no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no paths, no roads. It was an abandoned church. We left immediately and went back up the hill to our chosen campsite. Having a hill between us and the church made us feel better, but we were still a little uneasy. We chalked it up to the natural creepiness of seeing a church in the middle of the woods. At this point, it was dusk, so we rigged up our hammocks and decided to sleep, planning to move on early morning. Night set in. As we lay in our hammocks and talked, we began to hear something from the direction of the church. Our conversation went like this. "Do you hear that? What the fuck is that?" "It sounds like people singing." And it did sound just like singing. We both slid out of our hammocks and hunkered down, straining to hear more. We listened for a minute or two. The singing continued, but wasn't getting louder. Finally, we decided to creep back up the hill to spy where the sound was coming from. We could still move very quietly in the woods from the old days. It was second nature. The moon was barely out, providing just enough light not to walk into a tree, but it was near pitch black. We didn't use flashlights as we crept slowly up the hill, and we didn't talk. When we got to the top, we saw light in the distance, coming from the church. The singing was coming from inside. Joe and I put our heads close together for a hushed conversation that boiled down to, "Can you believe this bullshit?" The light looked like candlelight from the way it flickered. Though we tried, we couldn't make out what was being sung. It sounded like church music, but in another language. We sat and watched for a while, trying to see who was in there, but only saw occasional shadows. We had no intention of getting closer. We had about a football field's length between us, and we aimed to keep it that way. The singing continued for a bit, then stopped. After that, a booming male voice began to chant. I was already freaked out, but this voice thoroughly scared the hell out of me. It sounded like some Old Testament preacher from movies, but again, it was like he was speaking in a different language because we couldn't understand a single word. Eventually, the single male voice would say something, and then a bunch of voices would answer in song. This lasted for a while, and then they all broke into this long, sustained wail that just kept getting louder. It got so loud and so disturbing that I covered my ears. Then it stopped. At this point, I was just getting ready to say, "Let's get the fuck out of here," when Joe put a hand on my shoulder and hissed, "They're coming out!" We were far enough away that we couldn't make them out well, but we saw a line of figures walk out the open doorway, all holding hands in single file. We could see some of them had flashlights. They began to sing again, and the light from the flashlights began to move toward us and the hill. We booked it back down to our campsite, grabbed our things, and ran to the tracks. Once there, we ran down the tracks in the direction we had come from. After a few minutes, we stopped and looked back. We saw lights coming down the hill. They were moving erratically, like whoever was holding them was shaking them. We continued to run in spurts and walk as fast as we could. We eventually stopped seeing the lights and came to a road. By our map, we knew a small town was about 15 minutes down it. We walked there, got to a 24-hour gas station, and called my wife to come get us. My wife and other friends all just thought it was kids messing around. But I heard those voices, and they sure as hell didn't sound like kids to me. Not sure who those people were, but it was definitely the creepiest thing that happened to me out in the woods.
These accounts of journeys into the vast and the unknown, whether through physical darkness or the profound void of experience, reveal the human impulse to venture beyond the ordinary. They speak to the moments when the familiar recedes and something immense takes its place. Ryan, Michael, and Christopher for sharing with us. If what you have heard tonight mirrors something you have lived, leave a comment below. Your story may find its way into a future episode. Subscribe so none escape you. Thank you for listening.